You can find this podcast and others at Gun Rights Radio Network, gunrightsradio.com. Podcasting freedom.
Welcome to episode 49 of Shooting the Breeze, the formal gun podcast of Walt IDPA.com. I am Walt White, and since episode 48, it's been about a week now, things have been really busy. First, there was some news about an internet cafe hero, 71-year-old Sean Williams, shot two burglars that busted into an internet cafe. One was armed with a gun, the other was armed with a bat. That was kind of feel-good news for concealed carry permit holders or license holders across the country. And, it was a good, solid story about how a person with a concealed weapon could protect not only themselves but the people around them in an internet cafe or any store or public place for that matter. And then after that, we had really miserable news. I got it on my birthday of all days about the Aurora, Colorado shooting, and it was just kind of miserable, and there's just not a whole lot to say about it. The thing about both of those news stories is I really don't want to talk about either one of them. It's not that I have an emotional connection to either one. It's just that on this podcast I don't like to do things that you've already heard half a dozen times elsewhere. Obviously, if you're listening to my little podcast, you're listening to the bigger guys do their podcasts, and I'm sure that these two particular news topics have been brought up numerous times on all of those other bigger podcasts. So there's really no need for you to hear it, half a dozen to a dozen times, from those guys plus little old me. So we're just going to skim over those. One of the news topics does involve the first shooting with the older gentleman, Sean Williams, in the internet cafe. However, I want to kind of take a look at it from a different perspective, something that you may not have heard elsewhere. I found an interview, or came across an interview of the two thieves, which I thought was kind of amusing. The mindset of these two individuals who felt, I don't know, slighted for being shot, if you want to call it that, but it was kind of interesting, and we're going to go with that. I don't know, I guess I'm kind of being hypocritical. I'm telling you I'm not going to talk about it, but now I'm telling you I'm going to talk about it a little bit. But at any rate, I have, I believe, two pieces of news. One we already talked about. The other one is kind of long, and being that it's still fairly early in the morning, I'm probably going to absolutely obliterate the second piece because of the length of the article. I've got three pieces of featured content, a cigar and drink pairing, a discussion topic that may wind up a little short, but I'm kind of grasping at straws at this point, and then we're kind of going to close it out. Hopefully we'll get through this podcast nice and smooth, and I won't ramble on for 20 minutes like the last one when we hit the discussion portion, but I hope you enjoy the podcast nonetheless. Before we get into the news, it's kind of tradition, I guess, that I talk about the contest that I'm running on my blog. I'm giving away a signed copy of Shoot, Your Guide to Shooting in Competition. Just in case there was any confusion, I'm not signing the book. Julie Golub, the author of the book, is signing it for you. Actually, she's signing a book plate and sending that along separate. I have the books, she has the book plates, so winners get two packages. But at any rate, I kind of wanted to remind you about this contest, and at the same time, I don't know, maybe vent a little bit, a little frustration. The last couple of contests have been really disappointing with the turnout. I've been trying to make them as easy as possible. This month it's just tell me what you did in guns today, with multiple entries for multiple days. I've got, I think, 20 entries at this point. Actually, I think there are 20 comments on the article itself, or on the post, one of which is me explaining how to post pictures. So that's kind of disappointing at this point. I was really expecting to see a lot of entries because of how simple it is. Last month, I don't know that we've got much over 60. The month before that was kind of hit or miss. So the last few months have been, I don't know, a bit disappointing. It would seem it's difficult to give away free stuff. And I'm not quite sure what to do going on forward. I said that I would give away 1 book a month for 12 months. I'm going to do that. I'm just not nearly as excited about it as I was. I'm not really a big self-promoter. I don't like spamming my links everywhere. I really don't mind talking about it every podcast episode because, well, this is kind of my podcast, and I don't know, I feel like it's okay. I don't like spamming Twitter. I don't like spamming Facebook. And I guess it kind of leaves me in a bind because I'm not constantly reminding people about it every day. I don't know what that is going to do for the overall results of this contest. I have to figure out how to make it more appealing to the masses and make it a little more accessible, and I don't know, maybe make it a little more visible going forward in future months. But if you're interested in winning a free copy of Shoot, Your Guide to Shooting in Competition, as of July 24th, your odds are fantastic if you head over to waltmpa.com. At the top, there's a scroller. Wait for the giant picture of the book to appear. Click on the picture. It will open up the contest post, and you can get your entries in. Your odds are pretty good, especially if you add multiple entries between now and the end of the month. It's with only like 19 entries, it's practically a lock at this point. All you need to do is just put in a bunch of entries. But at any rate, there's your contests. Go participate, please. And if you have any feedback you would like to give me on how to make this thing easier or make it a bit more appealing, head over to waltmpa.com, click on the contact button, and send me a note either via email, social media, however you prefer. First up in the news is that piece that I talked about earlier. We all know what happened with Sean Williams and the internet cafe robbery. Basically, 2 guys burst through the door, one of them carrying a gun, one of them carrying a bat, of an internet cafe. It's filled with patrons who are, from what I understand, I guess it's sort of like a legalized gambling hall for online gambling, and demanded money and cell phones. And this older gentleman, Sean Williams, decides that he's going to protect himself. He pulls a pocket pistol from his pocket and he opens fire on the guy with the gun. Both of them scurry like rabbits to the door, falling over one another, and they get away. I believe Sean Williams fired 6 shots, 3 were on target, and both criminals were apprehended later on. One was taken to the hospital, and I'm not sure whether the other one was or not. But at any rate, you get the gist of what's going on with the shooting itself. I don't want to talk about the shooting. I want to talk about this article that I came across on Ocala.com from the perspective of the thief. And this is actually a rather large interview, or actually this is a rather large news report on the entire thing. I'm picking out a small portion of it, so if it sounds a little odd, it's because I've just picked a block of text out of the middle of this larger report and I'm talking about that. So this particular stuff that I'm talking about picks up with after the incident happens, and the news reporter is talking with one of the thieves. I don't remember which one. We'll find out as I read. But it goes on to say, quote, "I feel horrible. It doesn't feel good. It makes you think about life's decisions and how you should live your life," Henderson said in an interview with Star Banner at the jail on Saturday afternoon. Hours after his release from the hospital, Henderson, who talked about the pain he feels in his buttock and hip, said the plan was to barge in, get the money, and leave. He said he never expected anyone to be armed. The gun was broken and rusty and wasn't loaded. No one was going to get hurt, he said, standing with crutches. Retrieving the customers' cell phones was what he said was their main priority. That way, he said, the customers could not call law enforcement officials. Henderson theorizes the reason why he was caught off guard is because when Dawkins entered the business, he busted a computer monitor with a baseball bat and glass got into his face. He couldn't warn me, Henderson said. With the glass temporarily blinding his friend, Henderson noticed 2 women were behind the counter and he thought that was fishy. Turning around to see what the women were doing, Henderson said he was shot. I turned around to run and my leg gave out. That was when I got shot. I hit the ground, and and he was still shooting. I thought I was going to die, Henderson said. Henderson said that, by the grace of God, his leg came back. I ran, he said. Henderson said he and Dawkins drove to a house to see a woman he said is like a mother to him. So, that's the block of text I've selected out of this larger article. It goes on to talk about how he gets to the hospital, and this woman that's like a mother to him, miraculously brings him back to life because he lost a lot of blood, and I guess he lost consciousness at some point. But that's kind of not the important part. The important part, I thought, was the mindset of the criminal. So it's almost as if he feels as though he shouldn't be shot because the gun was rusty, it didn't work, it wasn't even loaded. That didn't stop him from barging in and pointing a gun that people didn't know was rusty and broken and didn't work or wasn't loaded at people, and making them feel as though their life was being threatened. So I'm kind of at a loss for words at how he feels slighted by this whole thing. And then he goes on to say he fell down and the guy kept shooting. Why did the guy keep shooting? I wasn't going to shoot back. I wasn't going to hurt him. And that part was pretty interesting as well. The mindset of the criminal, like, oh, I was down. Why did he keep shooting? Because there was another guy in the room with a bat, and you weren't staying down. You probably still had a gun in your hand at that point. If you go, you break into my house and I shoot you, and you have a gun, and I shoot you, you go down. If you're still holding that gun, I'm going to keep shooting you until you're no longer holding that gun and you're no longer a threat, or you're dead. In which case you're no longer a threat. But I just can't quite understand how the criminal mind works in this sense. Here you have an individual that, he's upset. Later on he says, like, I don't remember what he says at the end of the interview. I could probably pop to the end and the quote for the other part was, I was down and I'm not going to continue to shoot you, he said. Henderson said he doesn't blame Williams for shooting. He takes exception with Williams shooting at him while he was down. So I guess he's not upset that he was being shot at, but he was upset because Sean Williams continued to shoot him after he was down, and still a threat, I would imagine, because he still had the gun. But in any case, I just can't get my head around how these people think, and how they think it's all right for them to take things from others. As long as they perceive no danger. Okay, no one's going to get hurt because this gun that I have is rusty and it doesn't work, it's not even loaded. That doesn't make it okay. And, that doesn't eliminate the need for deadly force. Or it doesn't, as far as I'm concerned, it doesn't eliminate just being used on this individual. Even if both our individuals were armed with baseball bats and they broke in, I still wouldn't fault Sean Williams for shooting either one of them either. And that's kind of where I want to end it. I don't want to get into too much about how the guy was, how the shooting took place, how he continued to shoot them as they were fleeing. That's kind of water under the bridge. It's all done. They already said that the charges weren't going to be filed against this guy. And basically he not only saved his life, but the lives of others. And I think it's great. And I thought this little piece was interesting on the criminals' accounts of the events. The second and final piece of news that I have for you is fairly lengthy. You'll have to bear with me as I try to get through this. I'm going to try not to stumble over it too much, but when I read this, to say that I found it was interesting was kind of an understatement. There's a lot of stuff going on in Philadelphia as of late surrounding the Philly top cop. I believe his name is Charles Ramsey. And there's accusations that he's violating state law. And this kind of goes on to outline that. But this comes from AmmoLand, and it was written by David Codera from The Examiner. And it was sort of reposted on AmmoLand. So, goes on to say, Commonwealth and municipal legal authorities have punted and ignored requests to investigate Philadelphia Police Commissioner Charles Ramsey for misdemeanor and felony violations of Pennsylvania's Uniform Firearm Act. Attorney Joshua Prince informed Gun Rights Examiner over the weekend. The interesting thing in that opening paragraph is there was actually a I guess it was a concealed carry seminar hosted by Joshua Prince in the area. It was actually hosted by a gun club that I belonged to. I think it was like $5 to get in or something like that. But unfortunately, I was unable to make it. But the connection between local gun clubs and the attorney that's actually handling this was kind of interesting, at least for me, at any rate. Ramsey has openly carried a firearm in the city of Philadelphia, but is neither a certified police officer nor does he have a license to carry firearms, Prince informed Attorney General Linda L. Kelly in an April 17 letter, providing citations to relevant Pennsylvania consolidated statute sections. Furthermore, he wears a uniform and displays a badge, but is not a certified police officer, in violation of Municipal Police Officers Education and Training Program. Accordingly, he is also not entitled to compensation. Gun Rights Examiner raised many of these questions in an April 5 column, reminding readers that those who aren't part of Ramsey's force receive harsh treatment from his ground troops when lawfully open carrying firearms, and that Ramsey testified before Congress opposing national right to carry reciprocity. In a city of the first class, which Philadelphia is classified as, an individual must have a license to carry firearms or be exempted to openly carry a firearm, Prince continued. I have seen Ramsey with a firearm openly displayed on his hip on numerous occasions while giving press interviews in Philadelphia. While I acknowledge there are exceptions, including for law enforcement, Ramsey is not a certified law enforcement officer, Prince informed the Attorney General, further reminding her that any person hired as a police officer shall be ineligible to receive any salary, compensation, or other considerations for the performance of their duties as a police officer unless the person has met all of the requirements as established by the Commission and has duly certified as having met those requirements by the Commission. While there is now conflicting evidence of whether he has become an MPOETC certified, such certification would not absolve him from past violations of the law nor change the fact that he was not entitled to compensation from 2008 through the date of certification, which must be reimbursed to the Commonwealth, Prince stated, concluding that a local investigation would be conflicted given the working relationship between the District Attorney's Office and the Philadelphia Police Department, and requesting a formal investigation to be opened by the state. The jurisdiction for the Attorney General to investigate and prosecute criminal activity is limited by state law. Frank G. Fina, Chief Deputy Attorney General, Criminal Prosecutions Division, told Prince in a May 7 reply on behalf of his boss, any violation of state law in this regard would fall under the authority of the District Attorney, Fina concluded, washing his hands of the matter. With the door to a state investigation slammed in his face, Prince took CDAG Fina's advice and sent a formal investigation request to District Attorney Seth Williams on May 23rd. To date, almost 2 months later, he has received no acknowledgement or reply. It appears they are being notified that the city's chief law enforcement officer may have violated firearms and other laws, being met with deliberate indifference on part of those tasked with prosecution. In addition to the documented complaints by the Philadelphia officials that preemption on firearms law preclude municipalities from enacting more stringent citizen disarmament edicts, it would also appear the Attorney General's excuse not to investigate is contradicted by the Commonwealth Attorneys Act, which states in part, the Attorney General shall have the power to prosecute in any county criminal court when there is the potential for an actual or apparent conflict of interest on the part of the District Attorney or his office. And the Attorney General may petition the court having jurisdiction over the criminal proceedings to predict or to permit the Attorney General to supersede the District Attorney in order to prosecute a criminal action or to institute criminal proceedings. Also, Pennsylvania's rules of criminal procedure require filing a private criminal complaint, further stating when the affiant is not a law enforcement officer. The complaint shall be submitted to the attorney for the Commonwealth, who shall approve or disapprove it without unreasonable delay. By ignoring the petition, it would appear D.A. Williams may actually be attempting to prevent Prince from being able to file for review in the Court of Common Pleas. Prince has not given up and will tell Gun Rights Examiner he will tells Gun Rights Examiner he will continue to advance his concerns through the system, including following up with the Attorney General for intervention in the District Attorney continues stonewalling, if the District Attorney continues stonewalling. Where the Chief of Police / Chief Law Enforcement Officer for the City of Philadelphia blatantly ignores the laws of the Commonwealth, including requiring the taxpayers to pay him a salary to which he is not entitled, while he continues to allow his officers to detain, arrest, and prosecute law-abiding citizens for lawful conduct, such as open carry in Philadelphia, where the individual has a valid license to carry firearms, there is an extreme disconnect that requires immediate attention and investigation, he told Gun Rights Examiner. Further compounding this situation is the close relationship between the Philadelphia District Attorney's Office, which is obligated to investigate and prosecute criminal activity, and the Philadelphia Police Department. It would appear that District Attorney Williams' disregard of my letter requesting investigation into these matters and his failure to respond accurately reflects the conflict in this matter, requiring the Pennsylvania Attorney General to intervene and take control of the investigation. Prince said, "The citizens of Philadelphia have a right to the return of his salary if he was not MPOETC certified at the time of receipt, and the citizens of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania have a right to see him prosecuted for all of his criminal acts, including openly carrying a firearm in a city of the first class, if he did not have a valid license to carry firearms at the time and was not MPOET certified." This article originally appeared on Examiner.com. So it's kind of lengthy and involved, and there was a lot of reading there, but it's really interesting everything that's going on. So here you have this chief Philadelphia top cop that came from the DC area, who is overseeing the Philadelphia Police Department. Since he began overseeing the Philadelphia Police Department, there were talks of stop and frisk actions going on. I don't know whether that ever happened, whether stop and frisk is happening in Philadelphia, similar to New York City. But it's one of those things that were being discussed. People that are openly carrying a firearm in the city of Philadelphia have been hassled quite a bit. There was that very, very large story several months ago. I believe the guy's name was Mark. He was walking to a local auto parts store, and he was detained at gunpoint by multiple police officers, harassed, screamed at. His gun was taken away. He was facing charges. Then after he released the audio recordings, you know, it was like the city was trying to get retribution, and they were piling on more charges, and it was just a nasty situation. After that, there were a couple more instances that went on YouTube or various other internet sites where audio and video was shared of the incident and things like that. And you know, here's just one of those things where the police commissioner or the police chief has openly stated that he's opposed to open carry. You know, he's opposed to national reciprocity. He's you know, thumping the desk about this Florida loophole with, you know, people getting licenses to carry in Florida and using those out-of-state licenses to get around Philadelphia obligations or Pennsylvania laws. It's here's a guy that's anti-gun, except when it's in relationship to him. So he's not a certified police officer. He hasn't had the required training, and he doesn't have a license to carry. Yet he carries a gun openly in the city of the first class. He wears a uniform. He wears a badge. He's getting paid, and it doesn't look like he's entitled to any of that. And now that there's a potential for him to face prosecution over this, the district attorney is stonewalling the attorney, and it's sort of being ignored. So how this develops is going to be really interesting. Personally, if the guy is violating the law, whether he's pro-gun or anti-gun really doesn't matter. In this case, he's pretty high up in the food chain in Philadelphia. So if he's violating the law, he's violating the law. You know, what's good for the goose is good for the gander kind of a thing. If you're going to bust the balls of the Philadelphia citizens that are openly carrying a firearm with a license, or any Pennsylvania citizen that has a license to carry and they're openly carrying in Philadelphia, and you're going to give them a hard time, you know, you should be getting the same treatment. You know, your laws, not only do your laws apply to the citizenry, they apply to you as well, who also seems to be a citizen. You don't seem to have any special granted rights as a police officer because you're not You're not one, it doesn't seem. So this whole thing is really interesting to me, being a native Pennsylvanian, and I'm really eager to see how this whole thing transforms. It's been a couple of months. I don't see this thing going anywhere soon. You know, this may take several months before more news is released, but I'm going to keep an eye on it. This week I have 3 pieces of featured content, and if you're new to the podcast, this is a little bit different than the news. Rather than read you word for word what's going on, I'm just pointing things out to you, suggesting that you go check it out for yourself, interjecting a little opinion into the end, and sort of talking about it as we go through. This first piece of featured content is Jessie Harrison Duff on a television show. It looks like it's called The Balancing Act. It's a talk show of sorts, and I'm really not quite sure where I got this link from. I just copy and pasted the URL into my show notes, and I'm kind of kicking myself for not noting the source. I don't remember who shared this, where I came across it at. I really don't know. The best I can tell you is it's on YouTube. You can check it out if you like. But it's your typical talk show. It's hosted by a woman. I didn't catch her name. I wasn't really listening very hard for it. And Jessie Harrison Duff is sitting across from her. And there's some typical banter back and forth about firearms and who Jessie Harrison Duff is, and you know, being afraid of firearms and how you can go about you know, being safe. And it's just some. It's a little bit of interesting banter back and forth. One of the most interesting things I heard from Jessie Harrison Duff was that as far as children are involved, you should get them involved in firearms. You know, eliminate that forbidden fruit mentality, and you know, familiarize them with the firearm. You know, I think that's a great game plan for getting children accustomed to firearms and keeping them safe. She then goes on to explain, after you obviously teach the children how to use the firearm and take away that mystique, you still put it in a safe place and things. From there, they roll into taking one of the producers to the range where Jessie has her shoot. It's a female producer. She's shooting, I think it's a Taurus Tracker in 22 or something, and you know, there's some shooting going on, and then there's some talking. You know, safety issues are pointed out, and you know, all in all, it's a really solid interview as far as informing the public of firearms and keeping them in a positive light as far as the public eye is concerned. And I thought it was really good in that sense. There really isn't anything here to learn if you're an active shooter or if you're already involved in firearms. You're really not going to take away anything from this. However, if you have a wife or something that's sort of on the fence, this is something you might want to show her so that she can, you know, see not only firearms in a positive light, but females shooting firearms and discussing firearms in a positive light. So head over to YouTube and check out the Taurus International Manufacturing video on Jessie Harrison Duff on the Balancing Act. The second piece of featured content comes from Everyday No Days Off, the ENDO gun blog, and this was a video that I came across yesterday or the day before, and it was like ridiculously short. It's about 1 minute and 32 seconds, or 1 minute and 36 seconds, and it is on Ice-T's view of firearms. I guess he was on some form of British talk show or some British news show, and they were discussing his hip hop / rap documentary that he's going to be featuring. And while he was there discussing this documentary, the news of the Colorado shooting came in, and the host took the opportunity to discuss firearms with him. Really short, and you know, the typical British perspective on guns is very evident in this clip, where you know, the guy's sort of prodding him like, well, what if guns make it easier, this, that, and the other thing, and he kind of just shuts him down one after another. And the video starts out with something along the lines of, you know, Ice-T says, you know, I'll give up my guns when everyone else does. And the British guy really doesn't know how to respond. And then he goes on to say, well, you know, if everyone in this room had a gun, would you want to be the only one without one? And, you know, he goes on to talk about, you know, firearms aren't meant for hunting. They never were meant for hunting. You know, as far as the Second Amendment is concerned, you know, it's to protect you from tyranny. And I think he makes a couple of good points in the video, and this British host just continues to try to prod him along the way to kind of get his point across, but he never really does. So again, dreadfully short at 1 minute and 36 seconds. I would have loved to see Ice-T discuss this further. I really like his mindset on this whole thing, and I kind of like the way he presents himself. He's a no-nonsense kind of guy, and you know, while I don't agree with everything, he just I find him discussing events and things like that kind of appealing. So head over to Everyday No Days Off and check out What Would Ice-T Do? The last piece of featured content that I have comes from RebeccaGuns.com, and it's entitled A Closer Look at the CC Holster Bags. Rebecca's from the Philadelphia area, and she works for Philster, which is a Philadelphia holster maker. And the actual holster maker was featured recently in one of the Philadelphia local newspapers. I don't remember which one. I think it may have been the Daily News. But recently, Rebecca has been working on a concealed carry bag for off-body carry for women. One of the common complaints that I hear about women carrying firearms is that holsters don't typically fit them very well because of their body shape and the fit of their clothing. It's difficult to conceal a firearm. And one of the things that Rebecca is developing is a bag to carry a firearm off body. Now, one of the typical concerns with off-body carry is that it's easy to snatch away the item. If a woman carries a gun in a purse, she runs the risk of having that purse snatched if she's in an urban area or any crowded city street kind of setting. You know, I've seen purses be snatched down in the Philadelphia area. It's a violent and very fast-acting crime. You know, you kind of it's just sort of ripped away and the guy runs off. And you know, a lot of the purses, at least that my wife carry, have these thin little straps, and I can't imagine them taking a whole lot of beating in terms of someone yanking on it while she's holding it on her shoulder or carrying it in her hand, you know, whatever the case may be. So off-body carry is kind of a concern. The holster bags that Rebecca is making or has made attach to the body somewhat securely. One of the bags she shows goes through a belt. So it's much more difficult to get the bag away. The other two bags have a what looks like a shoulder strap that's made out of a thick leather strap, so it's much more difficult to get the bag away in that case. So it seems as though she's got the off-body danger element covered in terms of purse snatching. She also has multiple ways to wear these bags. They can hold a variety of firearms. Basically, the bag itself holds a holster. So you take a Kydex holster that the bag has been designed for, and the holster gets affixed to the bag, whether it's laced on or velcroed on or strapped on. And then the gun goes inside of a that holster goes inside of a pocket, and the gun goes inside that pocket, and it's kept separate from all of the other compartments of the bag. So while obviously this isn't my thing, but I thought it was kind of interesting, and it's worth pointing out to any woman, you know, significant other, girlfriend, whatever that you may have that's concerned about carry and is looking for some sort of bag to carry the gun for them, and that doesn't want to carry, you know, a flimsy little purse with a firearm inside of it. So head over to RebeccaGuns.com and check out A Closer Look at CC Holster Bags. Well, we've come to one of my favorite parts of the podcast, and that is the cigar and drink pairing. It allows me to inject one of my other passions into the firearms podcast, and that is cigars. So, the coffee that I'm drinking, interesting enough, I'm not drinking the Second Amendment coffee this week. I'm still fighting with the Keurig machine and making it work. And actually, there was a funny comment by Tom from Fill Your Hands last week about how he's sort of comparing the Keurig machine to the 1911 status, and how you know, 1911 enthusiasts feel about the Glock because of my thoughts for the Keurig. You know, it's fancy, it's big, and it doesn't work right, or it doesn't work reliably, kind of a thing. You know, kind of a 1911 joke in there somewhere. I thought it was amusing when I heard it. But I'm still fighting with the machine, so I popped in a, was it Green Mountain coffee canister today, Keurig K-Cup, or it was Kenyan AA extra bold blend. It's alright coffee, but nothing to write home about. The cigar, on the other hand, is the Drew Estate Liga Privada No. 9, and The Liga Privada line is very interesting because it utilizes so much tobacco. I've never seen a cigar with a list of tobacco in it as long as this one. I think it's something like 8 or 9 different countries of origin are all stuffed within this cigar. It's very complicated, and as a result, it's a pricey cigar. I think they're like $12 or something like that. Because they're so expensive, I don't smoke them very often, but I just love the Liga Privada line. The number 9 is probably my least favorite of the Ligas. It's still a very good cigar, however, I probably would sell a kidney for a lifetime supply of Liga Privada T52s. But these are good, solid cigars. They have a nice, meaty sort of flavor to them. They're very rich. They have a medium to full flavor profile, medium body. Good smoke volume. They smoke really well. The thick smoke coats the palate, and these cigars smoke really well at 6 a.m. and they smoke well at 9 p.m. as well. You know, they're an all-day kind of a thing. They're not overpowering in the morning. They're a good solid smoke in the afternoon, and they still have enough power in them in the evening to cut through the char of whatever you've eaten throughout the day. So good solid cigar, a little pricey, but I think they are fantastic. I really like them. So if you're interested in trying the Liga Privada line, Mike carries both the number 9 and the T52 over at Buckhead Cigar in Atlanta, Georgia. If you're interested in ordering, you can pick up your phone and give Mike a call at 404-844-0400. Tell Mike Walt sent you, tell him what you want, and he'll box it up and ship it to you. Typically he does 5-pack and box ships, either 5-packs or boxes. If you're looking for pricing on some of the newer product that Mike carries, you can head over to askthecigarguys.com. It's not a retail site, but it does list pricing on, again, products that Mike sells by the 5-pack, by the box of 10, 20, you know, depending on how the cigars are packaged. Shipping is always included in that price. So what you see is what you pay, and oftentimes Mike is either on par with some of the larger manufacturers or slightly lower when you factor in shipping costs. Mike is also on social media if you kind of want to feel him out, talk to him a little bit. He's on Twitter as @BuckheadCigar, and Facebook and Google Plus as Buckhead Cigar. So not only will you be supporting my preferred cigar retailer, but Mike is also a fellow gun nut. So order some cigars, tell him Walt sent you, and that's going to do it for the cigar and drink pairing of the episode. 2. Last week during the discussion topic portion of the podcast, I talked about concealed carry holster options and how I was looking for something for a Glock 19. Well, I've ordered the Glock 19. I contacted Custom Gun Finishes out in the Pottsville area of Pennsylvania, and I had them order a Glock 19 Generation 4. It was they offered the best pricing, and I deal with Custom Gun Finishes for USPSA, so I had them order the gun since they have an FFL, and you know, I got a little bit of a price break on it, and saving money is always important when you're, you know, talking about a $500 gun, $550 gun. So the gun has been ordered, and I'm pretty much decided on a holster at this point. I think I'm going to go with the Concealment Solutions holster, the Black Mamba. I was looking at various different holster types. During that podcast, I talked about Concealment Solutions, Tice holsters, and Michael's Custom Holsters from theholstersite.com. I got some information back from Michael's Custom Holsters. Unfortunately, there was a 10-week lead time, and I just didn't want to wait that long for a holster. So that kind of pushed him out of the running. He makes a great product. It looks fantastic. I've heard nothing but good things about his work, but a leather holster is a little more expensive than I'm accustomed to paying with a hybrid. I really didn't mind paying what he was asking for the holster. However, the holster plus magazine pouches were rather expensive. So if I would have bought a holster from him, it would have been a holster alone, and the 10-week lead time just was too long for me. So I'm going to go with the Concealment Solutions holster. I just need to put the order in, and I'll tell you about it when I get it. The other thing that I wanted to talk about with the Glock 19, however, was my distaste for Glock sights. The stock Glock sight is, I find it to be tremendously distracting. I don't like that it's plastic to begin with, but the rear sight has this giant sort of U painted on it. So when you press the gun out and you go to get a sight picture, the first thing that you see is this giant U, and I really struggle with focusing on the black front sight post or I guess the stock sights have a white dot in them, but I really struggle with focusing on that little white dot out further when you have this giant white U underneath. So one of the first things that I did when I purchased my Glock 17 was purchase aftermarket sights for it. And the same thing was going to happen when I ordered the Glock 19. So I've been spending a little bit of time shopping around for sights for the G19. And I've settled on a particular sight, but there was a couple of steps that I went through before I decided. And that was, for this particular carry gun, do I need night sights? Do I need some sort of tritium fiber optics setup? You know, what precisely do I want for this gun? And I was bouncing back and forth between the top of the line True Glow set, which is I think $119. It uses tritium fiber optics in both the front and rear sight, and it uses tritium in both the front and rear sight, and it has a fiber optic set inside that tritium insert. So what you have is, during the day you have a giant dot. Well, you have 3 giant dots during the day, and at night the tritium glows and it lights up the fiber optics. So at night you just see the glowing fiber optics, and well, you see the light ring from the tritium, but it makes seeing the sights in low light conditions very easy because the tritium glows. It's not like that glow in the dark paint you used to see when you were a kid, where you have to expose it to light for a certain period of time, and then it then expels that light when it glows. In this case, this tritium just glows. You can just keep it in a dark box forever, take it out of the box, and it'll glow. Well, not forever. There is a lifespan on it, but the tritium makes for great sight acquisition in dark conditions. So I was going back and forth, you know, do I want to spend this kind of money on this type of sight set? You know, I don't have to worry about the bad guy seeing the sights glow because the tritium doesn't go all the way through. The muzzle end of the gun isn't glowing. It's just the user end that sees the glowing tritium. Well, a friend of mine has a Glock 17 with those True Glow sights in them, and my only complaint with that gun is that the dots on the sights are too large. The rear sights aren't terribly distracting because the front and rear sight dots are the same size. My eyes aren't drawn to the rear sight like they are with the stock Glock sights, that giant white U. So the True Glow sights were going to be very usable for me, but I didn't know if that's exactly what I wanted. So I started looking around at other options. On my Glock 17, I have Warren Tactical fiber optics. It's a plain black rear with a fiber optic front. You know, when I first put those sights on there, I thought, okay, you know, this is going to take some getting used to. I'm not accustomed to just a black rear sight, and only having one dot is going to make it difficult lining up those sights. As it turns out, it's not difficult at all. I got used to it really quickly, and I fell in love with that style sight. The black rear just works, and getting a sight picture with that gun at relatively close range is ridiculously easy. The first time I pressed that gun out and I engaged steel at 10 yards, I almost felt like I was cheating. It was just that easy to get the sights on target that fast as compared to stock sights. And I just fell in love with those Warren Tactical sights at that very first USPSA match. So that was another option that I was looking at for the Glock 19. However, my concern was, am I going to be able to line up these sights in low light conditions? The rear sight has no, there's no helper dots or anything on there. So if the light gets kind of dim, what's going to happen when I press the gun out? So I started talking on Twitter with a couple of different people. Primarily Ron from When the Balloon Goes Up and Tom from Fill Your Hands. We were discussing how that comes into play, or even if it comes into play, you know, low light situations. And one of the topics that came up was, if it's too dark for you to see the rear sight, it's too dark to take a shot, or to take a safe shot. So I really hadn't been considering that up to this point, and I thought that was a great point to bring up. And it sort of eased my concerns of, am I going to be able to see this rear sight? Another one of the topics brought up was that you're not actually looking at the rear sight, you're looking through it. You're looking for light cast around that notch. So you don't really need it in low light situations. You don't really need the dots. You don't need the reference points in low light situations. You just look through the notch and line up the front sight. even in fairly low light, that green fiber optic that I use in the G17 still lights up a little bit. It collects the minimal light that's in the room, and it's still visible. It's not glowing bright green like when I'm shooting during the day, but it is visible. I went into a fairly dark room and was kind of pointing the gun to see just how much light this fiber optic picked up, and I was pretty happy with how it worked. It does have some limitations. It is a little difficult to see in the dark. If I was woken up in the middle of the night, with my eyesight being a little bleary, from just waking up, I don't know how easy it would be to get a good solid sight picture, but I was pretty confident in those sights, and having experience with them on the G17, I was much more comfortable with being able to use those, especially during the day. So I ended up pushing aside the TrueGlow option, and I ordered a set of Warren Tactical fiber optic, or Warren Tactical with a front fiber optic for my Glock 19. I was actually able to find a stock dealer who was able to order the sights at a little bit below the MSRP, and I saved some money there, which was awesome. Thanks a lot, by the way. I don't want to say who it is because I don't know whether or not they want to advertise it, but I really appreciate the help going into helping me save a couple of bucks on that site. Even after shipping, I still saved a couple of bucks on MSRP, which was awesome. Another option that Warren Tactical has is they have a front sight with a tritium insert in it. However, I was still concerned with, okay, if the front sight is glowing, am I still going to have that? Am I still going to have manipulation problems with the rear sight? Am I going to be able to line it up? But this was before I started playing around with my particular sight and realized that the fiber optic was enough for me, at least in my situation, my home. There's still a little bit of light that comes through, and I can still get a good sight picture. At least, when I shut the lights off and, we've got the low light coming in, I can get a good sight picture if I'm wide awake. I don't know what it's like to roll out of bed and press the gun out and see what happens, but I've ordered a set of Warren Tacticals. I should be receiving those any day now. I'll take them with me when I go pick up the gun. I'll have Troy from Custom Gun Finishes put the sights on for me, and that gun will be ready to go. I don't know if it will fit in my Phobos holster that I use for the Glock 17. If it does, I'm planning on shooting my first IDPA match this weekend. If the gun fits in that holster, I'll shoot it at the IDPA match and let you know how it went. But in the meantime, tell me what you use. What is your preferred method of sights for concealed carry pistols? Do you use stock sights? Are you using some sort of tritium fiber optic? Are you using just standard fiber optics? Are you using blacked out sights? Tell me what you use. Tell me what you like about them. Tell me what you don't like about them, and maybe we can get a little bit of discussion going back and forth on the usage of sights on a carry pistol. It's about time to close out the podcast, but before I do, I want to thank you for checking out episode 49 of Shooting the Breeze, the formal gun podcast of WaltNPA.com. If you'd like to get in touch with me to talk about something I mentioned on the show, or to share ideas for future shows, that sort of thing, please feel free to head over to WaltNPA.com, click on the contact button, and fill out the form, click submit. I'll get it. There's also information there for social media contact, things like that. If you would prefer to use your own email client to send along, an audio attachment or a YouTube link or something like that, you can send me an email at walt@waltnpa.com. The Gun Rights Radio Network is still in need of donations, so if you've got a few bucks you wouldn't mind sparing, you can head over to actually WaltNPA.com. My show notes will have a link to the donation page on the Gun Rights Radio Network. If you're interested in supporting this podcast itself, there's a support button on my blog. Click that, it'll give you all the information you need. There's some passive ways to support the podcast, as well as outright donations through PayPal. But donate as little or as much as you'd like, in as many forms as you'd like. Again, there's a variety of ways to support the site. It's not all about money. But speaking of the Gun Rights Radio Network, some of the podcasts that you'll want to check out if you're not already listening to them include the Politics and Guns podcast, the Gun Dudes podcast, the Road Gunner podcast, Gunfighter Cast, and the Power Factor Show. One of the shows that I enjoy that isn't on the Gun Rights Radio Network is the Liberty or Zombie podcast. So once you get done listening to my podcast or viewing my podcast, however you decide to digest it, head over to the variety of other podcasts and check them out as well. So again, thank you for the continued support, and I will see you next week.
You can now hear Gun Rights Radio Network while you're on the go with Stitcher Smart Radio. On-demand news, talk, and more on your mobile phone. The latest episode is always available for you. No syncing needed and no memory or storage wasted. Available for your iPhone, Android phones, or your BlackBerry. Downloading is easy. Go to Stitcher.com or check out your app store. Stitcher Smart Radio, the smarter way to listen to radio. Gun Rights Radio Network shows can be found under Sources.